Rob Tubber here for Boxing News, joined by the one and only Jim Lampley here in Las Vegas ahead of Canelo Alvarez versus Jermell Charlo. Jim, real pleasure to see you. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Very well. Thanks very much for joining us here. It's a real treat and a bit of a surprise to see you here this week in Las Vegas.
Well, you should be surprised to see me here because the last time I was at a major prize fight was December 8, 2018, the last night that HBO was on the air with our boxing telecast. And the network had been sold. The new owners decided to back out of boxing. And in the years since then, I've been quietly teaching seniors and graduate students in communication at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill, living in the splendor of the trees and serenity of that beautiful college town, trying to be of some educational benefit to 20 and 21 and 22-year-old students, and watching everybody else do boxing on television. So now I have a new gig with an outfit called ppv.com, which is a live chat organization. We do live chat during the fights, available on the web, and this is my first week of doing that. So it's been a thrilling homecoming to come back to the boxing world.
You mentioned that it's nearly 5 years since HBO pulled out of boxing. Having watched you on the television when I was a young boy and grown up with HBO, even in the UK, kind of a fixture of the boxing landscape, I cannot imagine how much you would have missed it.
Well, no, you cannot imagine how much and I hope you never have to go through something like I have been through these last 5 years. It's a very heartbreaking deprivation, for the simple reason that none of us who were at HBO understand to this day what benefit the new owners thought they were going to get by getting rid of boxing. It was a very meaningful franchise for HBO. It was a strong incentive for people to buy the channel. They're still in the business of presenting programming to people who have bought the stream, whether it's on a satellite system or a cable system or whatever. They're still in that same business. So why did they get rid of boxing? I don't know the answer to that question, but it changed my life. Not necessarily for the better, and now it's been a lot of fun, thrilling this week to come back to a kind of old home week here in Las Vegas, in my longtime second home, the MGM Grand Hotel.
Well, I speak on behalf of every boxing fan and say it's fantastic to see you back around big-time boxing, Jim. So it's great to have you here.
Thank you.
So, Canelo Alvarez versus Jermell Charlo. It seems to be, Jim, the discussions around this fight are around three things: the weight, the inactivity of Jermell Charlo, and the relative decline of Canelo Alvarez.
If it is a decline.
If it is a decline. What do you make of those 3 points, which seem to be the significant ones around this fight?
So, obviously, at this moment in his career, 168 is the best weight for Canelo Alvarez. He agreed with me today that 168 is definitely his best weight. Obviously, Canelo had an original intention, reportedly, to fight Jermell Charlo, who is 6 pounds larger at 160. On paper, that would have made more logical sense. But the fact is, Jermell is the same height as his identical twin brother, and he's taller than Canelo. So there's an opportunity there within the physical envelope for him to put on 14 pounds and feel stronger, and maybe pack a little bit more power in his punch, and maybe not lose that much in terms of movement and elusiveness. So I don't rule out that the 14-pound jump could actually make Jermell feel better, more confident, give him some advantages that he wouldn't have had if he were going up in weight, or if he had begun as a 160-pounder coming into this process, as would have been the case with his brother. So I'll put the weight issue aside for the moment. Difference in styles. Jermell's got to be very careful not to set himself up for a Canelo Alvarez counter left hook. He's got to be judicious in the way that he attacks if he's going to be the attacker, and logic says that he should, and not to run afoul of Canelo's left hook, which is his money punch, particularly in late fight situations. And then the question of a decline. So what's the evidence of a decline? Well, he lost to Dimitri Bivol. I see that as a matchmaking error. I don't know who talked Canelo into fighting Dimitri Bivol, whether it was a promoter or somebody in his camp or Canelo himself, but there was nobody in the Western world who was clamoring for Canelo Alvarez to have to fight Dimitri Bivol. It was just an inexplicable decision for him to choose to go up and fight a guy who is longer, taller, an Olympic gold medalist, brilliant skills, carefully honed in the gym. Maybe Canelo thought that Vegas judges would always take care of him against an Eastern European fighter. Well, eventually you run into a wall thinking stuff like that. And I think, even inexperienced viewers who saw the fight would say, well, obviously Bivol has the advantage here. So that doesn't, to me, speak of a decline so much as it speaks to a loss in concentration, a momentary bad decision, whatever it was who prompted Canelo to think that he had to fight Bivol when he didn't. Maybe he saw it as a way of avoiding Beterbiev. Well, I see that. Why not avoid Beterbiev? He's the most brutal puncher in the sport. And he's a light heavyweight. So Canelo's not naturally a light heavyweight. Yeah, he won a fight or two at 175, but he was beating the battered hulk of Sergey Kovalev, not the real Sergey Kovalev. So I think he knows that now. At the end of the day, I think that Canelo has a great deal to fight for. He says to me today, I'm still number one pound for pound. That's not the way the world sees it. The world sees Terence Crawford as number one pound for pound now because of the decisiveness with which he beat Spence and because of everything else he's accomplished. So I understand why Canelo, given his pride, wants to say I'm still pound for pound number one. That's not the way the boxing world sees it. And if he wants to retire as pound for pound number one in the eyes of other people, then the road to that has to go through a fight with Crawford. So I think he wants to beat Jermell Charlo, at least set him up for the discussion of a Crawford fight. See what happens in the negotiation about weight for that one. If that fight's going to be at 168, advantage Canelo. If it's going to be at 160, I still feel advantage Canelo. If it's going to be at 154, now we might be getting into advantage Crawford. I don't think Canelo could even possibly think of making 147. So logic tells you they could probably make the fight at 160. Can Crawford beat him at 160? I don't bet against Terence Crawford in any circumstance against any opponent. He's the best fighter in the world right now.
You mentioned there about Terence Crawford, Canelo Alvarez, another name that people draw on for the pound-for-pound discussions, Alexander Usyk, Naoya Inoue, but those first three names, Usyk, Canelo, Crawford, they're all, coming to the end of their respective careers.
They're all middle 30s.
Middle 30s, which, on some people, Canelo's 33, but with the amount of fights he's had and turning over young, it's an older 33 than some 33s. Who, in your opinion, assumes that mantle of the next generation to become the generational talent? Who is the I guess the king in waiting for the pound for pound throne?
Well, Inoue is there, and he's most people's number two right now, and he's a spectacularly talented fighter, and he's not as old as the guys we're talking about. So we may look at a few years in here going forward in which Inoue would be the number one pound for pound guy. And then what if Charlo pulls a win here Saturday night? If Charlo pulls a win here Saturday night, now he's in the discussion, and he's the one who gets to deal with the question of whether he wants to fight Terence Crawford. So, yeah, I think that Inoue and Jermell, if he wins, are two logical options for what you're talking about.
Naoya Inoue is a phenomenon, a four-weight world champion, of course, unified the bantamweight division, went up and beat Stephen Fulton at super bantamweight.
Sensational left hook, a gift from God.
An unbelievable talent. There are parallels that people are beginning to draw between him and a fighter that you covered extensively throughout his career, a certain Manny Pacquiao. Do you see those comparisons?
No. Manny Pacquiao is much more of a rough-hewn, wilder product when I first saw him. Inoue is all craft, and so I think they're different. Pacquiao was manic energy, violent punching power, unbridled courage. He had a lot of things. Inoue is more disciplined, more precise, more scientifically trained, and probably from a technical standpoint better than Manny was at that stage. I understand the reason for the comparison because they're both Asian, but I think that we're talking about two different kind of fish.
I want to just quickly touch on a few things before. I mean, you're a very popular man around these parts. Again, I think everybody's excited to see you this week, so everyone wants to grab a word. But a few general questions, I think, before we wrap things up. Very, very difficult one this is going to be for you. If you could relive one fighter's career that you covered, who would it be and why?
Relive one fighter's career.
Go back and do it all again, Jim.
Whom I covered. Very interesting. I'm partial to heavyweights. Everybody's partial to heavyweights. I was not just because of the contractual relationship, but because of the personal relationship, I was tremendously partial to Lennox Lewis in this country. I was more of a supporter of Lennox when he was at his peak than a lot of the people here who were more interested, for obvious reasons, in Tyson and Holyfield. I loved Mike. I began my boxing commentary career calling Mike's fights, but I thought Lennox was fascinating. And I thought that Lennox had a lot of tremendous nights, and I think he was very brutally and severely robbed in the draw with Holyfield, and that prevented him from getting some of the credit he deserved as the greatest heavyweight of his era. You say to an American fan now, okay, the greatest heavyweight of the 90s was Lennox Lewis, and the fan says, wait a minute, Mike Tyson, Evander Holyfield, he beat them both. Come on. You know, he was the better fighter. And so that would be a career that I would enjoy reliving.
Put Lennox Lewis in there with a modern-day Tyson Fury. What happens?
That's a great question. And the reason that that's a great question is because I've told this story several times this week. I was at dinner here in Vegas probably 15 years ago with Emmanuel Stewart, my closest male friend ever in adult life. And I said, Emmanuel, I've heard that you have Tyson Fury in the gym. Are you working with Tyson Fury? He said, yes, Jimbo, I've got him in Detroit. And I am, yes, absolutely working with him in the gym. And I said, Emmanuel, why would you be interested in Tyson Fury? He looks to me like a clumsy oaf who's never going to amount to anything. And Emmanuel put down his fork and put down his knife. He looked at me and he said, Jimbo, he's going to be the heavyweight champion of the world, and there's absolutely no doubt about it. And not only am I going to tell you that he is a certain heavyweight champion of the world, but he might become an unbeaten and unbeatable heavyweight champion of the world. Look at him now. And one thing I like to ask people who are boxing historians is, okay, given the height, the weight, the skill set, all the things he does, who would you pick to beat him? Who is it that you're going to point to and say, okay, this guy would have beaten? You're not going to point to Marciano. I don't even think you can point to Joe Louis. Maybe Lennox Lewis. Maybe Muhammad Ali. But he still would have advantages against them. One thing that's overlooked is, look at his hand-to-eye coordination. How many times did we see him against Wilder launch a punch on one arc? Wilder moves his head, and Tyson changes the arc of the punch and lands it on the target. How can you do that? So he's extraordinary. And, until he gets bored, until he makes mistakes in his personal life, until he, completely ditches all valuable nutrition and drinks way too much, etc., I'm not sure who's going to beat Tyson Fury.
So let's go for the Lennox Lewis that beat Hasim Rahman in the rematch against the Tyson Fury who stopped Deontay Wilder in the rematch, the second fight. Who wins that fight?
I'd like to see it. I'd really like to see it. And I'll be straight with you. I'll be totally straight. I'm not friendly with Tyson Fury. I'm brotherly with Lennox Lewis. So let me say Lennox, all right? And Lennox had a lot of confidence. Lennox was very secure in himself, even after the loss to McCall in London. He took a look at what had happened, realized the circumstances, fired Pepe Correa, and hired the trainer who had beaten him. Emmanuel trained McCall for that fight. Lennox basically called him up a couple weeks later and said, "Would you train me?" And that changed his life and changed his career. It was a brilliant decision. Um, yeah, I think I would have to put my money on Lennox.
For Tyson Fury, it seems as though the general feeling around him is that he had the brilliant win against Vladimir Klitschko away from home in a fight where a lot of people didn't really give him much of a chance. He had the brilliant wins over Deontay Wilder. But outside of that, he doesn't have those names that Lennox built his career. I mean, yes, he beat Holyfield and he beat Tyson, but he beat Ruddock, he beat Briggs, he beat all of these other contenders of the day that we haven't really seen from Tyson yet. Does Tyson need to clear out this era in order for him to really be on that pedestal of a Lennox?
It's interesting that you say that. Lennox got great opponents because a lot of people wanted to doubt Lennox, always, okay? Even after he was winning the fights and going through, people were still looking and saying, "Oh, I see the holes in this. I know that I can beat him." So guys kept lining up to fight Lennox Lewis, and he kept getting great win after great win. Nobody's rushing to fight Tyson Fury. Tyson Fury still isn't known well enough in the United States to be a surefire marketing superstar here. He's fighting in England where people know him and appreciate him, but that doesn't have as much impact on the boxing world as if you do it in Vegas, if you do it in New York City. I think that it's a tough road to hope for Fury to be fully appreciated for who he is. And, I mean, we've got a whole generation of people here in the United States now who've watched his reality show on cable television and don't even know that he fights. It's wacky. But yeah, Lennox had a better deal in his time, and Lennox had a continuous long-term contract with HBO. We had Tyson at first. We signed Lennox. King got upset. Tyson went to Showtime. They wound up with Tyson and Holyfield. We had the champ. We had the guy who was number one.
Okay, the final question from me. I do appreciate your time today. There's many, many great HBO nights, legendary nights that we can look back on. But the one that I always find myself looking back on, particularly when I think about you, Jim, is the trilogy between Arturo Gatti and Mickey Ward. What can you tell me about what I am guessing would feel like such a huge honor and a privilege to be a part of a trilogy about really that kind of, in its own way, crossed over and was bigger than just a fight and just a series of fights between two fighters?
Anytime I'm taking somebody to a fight who has never been to boxing, experienced boxing, or seen boxing, and this is what I think of when I think of Arturo and Mickey. I always say to people, you have to understand, you're going to look at this and you're going to think, this is brutality, and this is inhuman, and it's not pretty to watch people hit each other this hard and hit each other this relentlessly and try to hurt them. I said, you have to understand, through all of that, this is a sport about love. This is a sport about a unique form of passion. When you watch two fighters, think Arturo and Mickey, seemingly try to kill each other for 12 rounds, and then the bell rings at the end of the 12th and they fall into each other's arms, that's because at that moment they are in love. And they are in love partially with the fact that they know more about each other now than their mothers know, or than anybody else on the planet can know about them. They share something that's so intense and so secret that it's theirs and only theirs. I always say, in a truly great 12-round fight, back in the day, a 15-round fight, only the two guys in the ring know who won. They're the only ones. Judges can make a guess, but at the end of the day, only those guys know who won, if, in fact, anybody won. In the case of Arturo and Mickey, that leads to Mickey delivering the eulogy at Arturo's funeral, Mickey delivering the induction speech when Arturo was posthumously inducted into the Hall of Fame in New York. I weep because I love them. I love them too. I'll never forget after the first of the 3 fights, the most brutal one, at the Mohegan Sun Casino. I walked out of the arena about 15, 20 minutes after the final bell, and I ran into Pat Lynch, who was Arturo's manager, in the hallway. And Pat was bereft, and he was shedding tears, just like I'm shedding tears right now. And I said, Pat, why are you so upset? And he said, I can't believe we lost. I just cannot believe that, through all of that and after all of that, we wound up losing the decision. I said, Pat, if you found 150 fans from tonight, a year from now in this casino, and you asked them who won that fight, very few of them are going to get it right, okay? Nobody cares who wins a fight like that. There are 2 winners. Leonard Hearns, the first fight. 2 winners. There are always 2 winners when people fight that passionately, that beautifully, that violently, that heartbreakingly. And they did. And so those are special things. And you have to understand boxing. You have to love boxing. You have to appreciate it the way you and I do to know exactly what it is we're talking about. But those are the realities. Remember, after their 3rd fight, Mickey and Arturo insisted on going to the hospital in the same emergency truck together, because at that point they are brothers, or something closer than brothers. They're in some ways, they've traded their souls. They're the same. Mickey and Arturo were exemplars of the best kind of fighting, and it's violent, and it's scary, and it's dangerous.
There we have it. Jim Lampley, thanks very much for your time. Thanks very much for speaking to Boxing News. And once again, it is fantastic and a pleasure to see you back where you belong around big-time boxing. Enjoy the show on Saturday night.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.